Norman's day of reckoning. The firestarter never learns. Norman Price had always been the scourge of Pontypandy, a walking, talking disaster in human form. From the moment he discovered matches as a child, he was unstoppable. Fires, pranks, and chaos followed him like a loyal dog. As a kid, he'd always gotten away with it. A stern talking to from Fireman Sam, a tut-tut from his mother Dilys, and maybe a day of pretending to feel sorry. But now, Norman was 18. An adult. And in Pontypandy, adults didn't get off so easy. The blaze begins. One dull Saturday evening, Norman sat in his mother's corner shop, flicking a lighter on and off. Business was slow, and his mother was distracted by an argument over expired baked beans with Mrs. Chen. Boring. So boring, Norman muttered. He glanced out the window at a towering pile of discarded crates behind the grocers across the square. His eyes sparkled with the kind of manic mischief that had driven Fireman Sam to therapy. He slipped out, lighter in hand, and strutted to the pile. It was perfect, dry wood, some old tarps, and even an abandoned tire. He struck the lighter, grinning as the flame took hold. The fire caught quicker than he expected, licking hungrily at the crates and spreading to a nearby wooden bench. Norman backed up, suddenly realizing he might have overdone it this time. A town on fire. The flames roared higher, reaching out to the overhanging electrical wires. A small explosion sent sparks flying into the air, and within minutes, the fire had spread to the greengrocer's awning. Norman stood frozen, watching his little fun grow into a full-blown disaster. The familiar wail of sirens snapped him back to reality. The Pontypandy Fire Brigade arrived with Sam at the helm, shouting orders as his team leapt into action. "Norman!" Sam bellowed, spotting him immediately. "What have you done this time, you little shit?" Norman stumbled over his words. It wasn't me. I mean, maybe it was a little me, but not really." Sam's patience, stretched thin over years of Norman's antics, finally snapped. "I've had enough of this," he roared. "Norman Price, you're not just in trouble, you're going to jail." Norman's arrest. As the fire was brought under control, Norman found himself cornered by the local constable, who cuffed him on the spot. "This isn't funny anymore, Norman," said the officer. "You've endangered lives, destroyed property, and caused thousands of pounds worth of damage." Norman tried to wriggle free, whining, but it was just a bit of fun. The townspeople gathered to watch, muttering angrily. Mrs. Chen shook her fist. "He nearly burned down my shop." "My garden shed is gone, you cunt," cried Mr. Evans. Even Dilys couldn't save him this time. "Norman," she said, wringing her hands, "I've told you to behave, but you never listen. What am I going to do with you?" Norman rolled his eyes. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, ma'am." A fiery trial. Norman's court hearing was a spectacle. The judge, an imposing woman with no patience for nonsense, rattled off his offenses like a laundry list: arson, reckless endangerment, property destruction, and obstruction of the fire brigade. "What do you have to say for yourself?" she demanded. Norman smirked, shrugging. "It was just a prank, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. "A prank?" the judge thundered. "You've terrorized this town for years, Mr. Price. It's time you faced real consequences. I sentence you to 6 months in prison and mandatory fire safety education." Norman's face fell. "Prison? But I'll miss Mam's fish fingers night. Pontypandy can breathe again, sort of." Norman's time in prison was a nightmare for the other inmates. True to form, he spent his days starting minor fires in the cafeteria, setting off smoke alarms and shanking random inmates just to see the chaos unfold. His cellmates quickly learned to steer clear of him, and even the guards began to dread their shifts. When he was finally released, Pontypandy hoped he'd learned his lesson. He hadn't. Within weeks, he was back at it, setting fire to a stack of newspapers outside the post office for old time's sake. Fireman Sam arrived, glaring at Norman as if sheer anger could extinguish flames. "Norman Price," Sam growled, "you'll never change." And he didn't. Norman continued his reign of fiery terror, earning a permanent spot on Pontypandy's most wanted list. As far as he was concerned, life was too short to take seriously and far too fun to stop playing with fire. The townspeople, weary but resigned, simply doubled the budget for the fire brigade. For better or worse, Pontypandy had its chaos back.